While we still don't have a clear picture of which party will be in control of Congress, the reality is House Republicans have so far managed to flip 16 seats. So what would a divided government mean in this economic environment? Let's bring in our guest, Angie Kamath. She's dean at the NYU School of Professional Studies. Angie, the president taking a bit of a victory lap yesterday, but you kind of get the sense that things are about to get a little more difficult given how divided the government is going to be, regardless of who's in control.
Absolutely. Kiko, it's so good to see you again, and thanks for having me. I think, on so many levels, this played out how we thought it was going to be played out. And we've been in a divided country for many years. So as I think about kind of what the midterm really means around politics, I think there are three tools that need to be dusted off and sharpened in terms of really managing through a divided government. And however Arizona, Nevada, Georgia fall, however the House and Senate go, the tools of the veto pen, the tool of executive orders, and the tool of compromise. The notion that we are going to have just inaction for the next 2 years, that it's going to be a 2-year stump for a 2024 presidency. I don't think Gen Z, who stopped presumably this red wave, I don't think they're going to stand for that. I don't think the voters in any district across the country, given inflationary pressures, are going to stand for inaction. And I think that it's going to be very important and very interesting to see how this plays out.
Let's talk about the key issues. I mean, in many ways, this will force both parties to work together unless you've got another 2 years of gridlock. The debt ceiling, raising the debt ceiling, really one of the key issues that people are looking at to see, is there going to be another government shutdown? How do you see this playing out when you think about what the makeup is going to look like?
Sure. So I think what's very interesting is looking at some of the issues that I think are unpopular for particular elected officials to push back home, but that are going to be a political necessity, right? So spending, the debt ceiling, SALT, reductions, or looking at the taxes in terms of the carbon tax, in terms of mortgage deductions, in terms of SALT. And so it's going to be very interesting to think about what compromise is going to look like, given that we need to make sure that we are putting ourselves on a good path over the next few years. I think the recession, and again, some good news this morning in terms of moderated inflation, but at the end of the day, people are worried about the economy. They're worried about their expenses. They're worried about jobs. And so I think that there is going to be a lot of politics that are going to be happening in Washington in terms of what this all means, in terms of what we can get past, in terms of immigration, let's say, in terms of spending and climate change. But at the end of the day, I think we're going to have to really take care of what voters back home are thinking about, because 2024 is looming, and that is a fact.
One of the issues that we have seen Republicans and Democrats willing to work together on is pressuring China. We know President Biden is set to meet with Chinese President Xi over at the G20 summit there. What are some of the steps that we're likely to see? I mean, is that pressure going to only ramp up, given that that's one of the few issues that the parties appear to see eye to eye on?
I think, Akiko, this is going to be quite interesting to see what happens around foreign policy. So while there is going to be a lot of focus on kind of what's happening internally, and certainly 2024 is reality, I think on foreign policy, I think on China, on Iran, on Ukrainian spending, I think on climate change. I mean, we're at COP27 right now. It's going to be really important to see what is happening. And I think there's a combination of a tough line, but also making sure that we are continuing to retain our space as a real global leader. I think the past few years, certainly the past 2 years, really, let's just kind of, even and think more closely, the past few years in terms of Russia, China, and the Ukraine, they need really critical focus from us. And so the fact that he's going today on, I think, what is going to be his longest and largest foreign policy tour of his presidency is quite substantial, and it's to be watched.
Finally, Angie, I'm curious how you think this is likely to shape the energy policy. This is one that we have seen a real division between Republicans and Democrats. Republicans ahead of the midterms, sort of put out this commitment to America, talking about accelerating permits for oil and gas. We know they've been quite supportive of the industry as well. I mean, how quickly can Republicans really move on that when you consider how narrow the majority, if they get the majority in the House, is likely to be?
I think climate is an incredibly important issue, and it is going to be one of the kind of very important issues with climate change in terms of just how it impacts people, how it impacts the extreme weather conditions. It's becoming closer to home in terms of an issue that I think is really going to be center and focus. Is it going to be issue number one or number two? No, I think safety, I think guns, I think reproductive rights probably have those first three slots, but I think energy is incredibly important. People are feeling it, and it's a global issue. It's not just for us. And so I think that it's going to be critically important for there to be some wins. I mean, I think that this is an area, while it can actually be a wedge issue, I think it could be a compromise issue as well. I think from the inflation perspective and from the kind of cost of living perspective, I think it is right up there, and it's not just about foreign policy for us. So I would look to this issue in particular to be one that voters start weighing in on and that the elected officials really have to start paying attention to. I think we're moving the debate past climate change deniers to what does this mean for kind of people's pocketbooks and their wallets.
Angie, it's good to talk to you again today. Angie Kamath, Dean at the NYU School of Professional Studies.